If you live in and around Boston, you are no stranger to the nightmare that is the T. For years, commuters have dealt with derailments, accidents, electrical issues, delays, slowdowns, and more. The latest headache? Speed restrictions. On certain sections of several MBTA lines, train speeds are still capped at 25 miles per hour or less. And on the Green Line and the Mattapan Trolley, the limit is in effect across the entire route. This is a cutback from a MBTA decision last week to impose a global speed restriction across the board after a site visit from the Department of Public Utilities found several track defects. The slowdown comes as the T is already operating on a reduced service schedule, cuts that were put in place last June and remain as the agency addresses a shortage of dispatchers, operators, and trains, preventing them from restoring to full service. The MBTA's advice to riders: allow an extra 20 minutes of travel time for their commute. So joining me to discuss all of this and, of course, the frustration, our state representative Mike Connolly, who represents Cambridge and Somerville, and Jared Johnson, executive director of Transit Matters. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So, Representative Connolly, I would love to talk about what you are hearing from your constituents about having this latest headache being the slowdowns.
You know, it's truly a disaster. And, you know, what really gets me perhaps more than anything are the stories from constituents who tell me, you know, I'm very busy, I'm working, I'm raising a family, and I don't get to tuck my kid in at night because I cannot rely on the train to get me home after a long day at work. And so we have a lot of work ahead of us, and we have to invest in people. We have to focus on safety, and we have a lot to deal with the MBTA's budget. And I'm sure we'll get into a lot of that.
Yeah. Jared, you know, I know that you speak with T riders, you help represent them in some spaces. I mean, what are you hearing from folks as it seems like insult to injury?
Yeah, you know, we're hearing from riders that they're turning to driving where they didn't used to drive into the city, but they just say, you know, I just can't afford to be late. You know, I can't afford to leave, 20 to 30 minutes early, and then still wind up late. So this is really having an impact. And I think the rep is correct in describing it as a disaster. And so we need to be taking it seriously, and we need to be marshaling the resources to fix it.
Well, speaking of resources, you know, Mike, talk to me about what you think should be happening with this massive budget that the T actually has.
Sure. Well, you know, there is some good news, I would say, and that is last year, Massachusetts, thanks to our voters, took a major step toward progress when we passed the Fair Share Amendment so that we can finally start making bigger investments in transportation. But that will take time to see, and there's a lot that needs to happen. I mean, right now, we have a shortage of bus drivers. We need more engineering talent, more project management talent, not to mention a general manager. So there's a lot of people investment that needs to happen at the T while we focus on safety, while we focus on operations, and while we focus on making capital investments so that the system can hopefully someday become world-class.
And just to follow up on that, do you think that the shortage in staff to run the T is because of the environment at the T, or is there a larger issue that's happening?
I think there's a lot of factors. Certainly, when Governor Baker took office 8 years ago, I know he focused a lot on capital investment, and there was a great focus on getting money out the door. And that was fine, but I think where the previous administration dropped the ball was in considering operations, considering safety, considering investments in the talent that can deliver. You know, here in my district, I'm so proud to represent Cambridge and Somerville. We have seen progress with the completion of the Green Line extension, but I will say a lot of people raised their eyebrows when we learned the general manager of that project, John Dalton, would be leaving town. And so that was a case where the T went out, they procured talent, that talent delivered, and now it's not clear that that talent will remain in the agency. And so I think there has to be a huge focus on investing in people. We can't simply outsource and then turn to consultants to tell us what to do. There's a place for that, but there has to be a place for investing in people, developing their capacity, and allowing them to help us turn this around.
And Jared, I would ask, from a rider's perspective, and I know you also deal with a lot of other folks who are within the MBTA, is this lack of staff being felt acutely as people are trying to get on the train, but also with the trains being late and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, as you mentioned, earlier, it's an issue with the control center, which is leading to longer wait times between trains. It's the lack of bus drivers, which has led to a cut last year. I think we're coming up on a year of the T cutting back bus service to match the amount of operators they had. And then just recently, there's a report that's come out that says that even under this reduced schedule, they're still not able to meet the bus trips that they've scheduled, and so those bus trips are being dropped. And even this latest incident with the track conditions and with the slow zones, this is related to the team not having enough maintenance workers to get maintenance done every night. And so I think the rep is spot on about how we put an emphasis into the capital budget, and that was great, but not thinking about that operating budget has consequences, and so that really has to be. The focus of this administration is not letting the foot off the gas, excuse the metaphor, on capital. We probably need to do even more on capital, but we have to have a commensurate focus on operations as well. There's just impacts being felt, wide across the system.
How much of this is due to the fact that there's an acting GM, but there hasn't been a GM that stayed on past a few years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. Not having that continuity and that stability, has been difficult. But I think the challenge for the T is that, I have no insight into when we'll get a new GM. I wish I knew that information. But the problem is that we can't wait for that new GM. And so, I think the interim GM that we have now is someone who's been at the T for a number of years, knows agency inside and out. And so I think we have to start that process now. And when we get the new GM, that's great, and they can jump in. But riders need to be able to get to work tomorrow, and so starting that process is really critical. And we shouldn't be waiting until we get a new GM, because without having the vision, without having the vision from the administration, without having support in terms of resources, a new GM is just going to walk in and spend 6 months getting up to speed with no progress. So it's really about the fundamentals.
And Representative Connolly, as I think about the slow zones and what lines have seemed to always be affected, it feels like it's always along low-income census tracts, low-income areas, communities of colors, working folks parts of the city that are largely and most greatly impacted by something like the slow zones, something like the work, something like the lines being delayed or rides being canceled.
It's so true. Somebody did the thought experiment the other day. Imagine if the state government woke up tomorrow and said all highways will be reduced to 35 miles an hour. It would not be acceptable. You would see many more elected officials on the front lines demanding that cannot stand. But when it comes to the transit riding public, these unacceptable conditions have been acceptable. And you rattled off all of the slow zones, dozens and dozens of block speed restrictions, global speed restrictions, and then the bus service, where the MBTA is so far behind in hiring bus drivers, hundreds upon hundreds of bus drivers, the positions are vacant. We are unable to fulfill a standard bus schedule. So I would agree with Jared insofar as, and also, former Secretary Jim Aloisi made the point that the general manager is not going to be a hero who can walk in and fix it all. We really have to focus on filling all of the different positions. And I do give Jeff Gonville some credit. I think he handled a terrible situation last week with some transparency. And also just a quick note, I don't know if people noticed, but Governor Healy has made some shakeups at the Department of Public Utilities. And this most recent set of slowdowns is a result of DPU actually starting to do oversight in a real way for the first time. So those were some very encouraging signs, but there is so much more that needs to happen.
Jared, you know, I heard about the slowdowns and immediately saw on Twitter people noticing the communities that will be the most affected.
Absolutely. You know, it's folks who don't have the ability to show up late to work. You know, if I'm running late on the train, I can, you know, join in from a Zoom meeting. I can, you know, do some things on my phone. But for a lot of low income workers, a lot of working class folks, you know, they clock in, and so that time spent on the train has a big impact on them. We're talking about parents for whom, you know, a $25 late fee for picking up their kids from childcare is a big deal. And so absolutely these things impact low income workers. And when we look at where low income workers are more likely to live, they're more likely to live out towards the ends of the subway lines. And so, you know, they might not have the opportunity to just catch a cheap Uber or Lyft ride or just bike there, you know, never mind the fact that the winter, but you know, these are folks who already have a long commute, and then we're adding, you know, 20 minutes on top of it, which, you know, the red line is already about 35 to 40 minutes slower from Alewife to Braintree already, and we're talking about adding more time on top of that. So it absolutely is a time tax on low income folks.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It is a time tax. In the last minute or a half or so, I would love to know what you both think the Healey administration needs to do going forward, or has done, or has in the works, as to help fix this problem for riders who are watching this, saying what Jared was saying. We need help now. We need solutions now. And Rep. Connolly, I'll start with you.
Certainly, I think we need a new version of the Fiscal Management Control Board. The board of the MBTA right now is in a bit of flux and limbo, so the governor and the legislature need to work together on that. I support Mayor Wu in her request to have the city of Boston represented on the board. And how much time do you have? I could talk for hours about what needs to happen, but I'll just come back to where I started to say, there has to be a focus on investing in people. We can't nickel and dime our way out of this. We have to invest in human talent, people who can work for the T for, you know, long periods of time and gain experience. We have to focus on safety, and we have to deal with an operating budget that is about to explode in the next fiscal year and create even more deficits and challenges.
Mm-hmm. Jared.
Absolutely agreed with everything, but I'd also add too that, you know, we need the administration has to make transit a priority. I think you know, oftentimes people try not to engage with it because they might not think it's a winning issue, but you know, this is something that has an impact across so many different avenues. You know, our work on housing and on smart growth, that does not work without the T. The ability to meet our climate goals will fail without the T. You know, our strategy to remain competitive economically will fail without the T. And so it really is. We have to make transit a priority, and we have to realize that we, you know, this used to be one of the best transit agencies in the country, if not the world. But that was when you had an administration, you had legislatures, when you had a community that was willing to put in the resources. And so we have to realize that the T is an investment. There was a report from years ago, even before the pandemic, that said, you know, on about a $3 billion a year budget, the T produces an impact of about $11 billion. And that impact is felt in every single corner of the state. And so, again, transit has to be a priority because it's connected to so many avenues and ways that we want to make our Commonwealth better, more equitable, more economically vibrant and fairer.
Well, we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Representative Mike Connolly and Jared Johnson, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Crystal.